We should note for our viewers that most of your books are very long. This book we're talking about is 464 pages.
That book went in at 900 pages.
900.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write it?
I don't know. You know, you don't go 9 to 5 for so and so in many months. Sometimes books just cook, and sometimes they. I think of it as in breath and out breath. You know, you come on. I'm usually not long between books. That is, when a book is over, I sort of feel empty enough to suck in the next book. And then occasionally there are projects that don't work out. But as soon as you know that a project has a future, it's looking like this could work, then there's in-breath time, where you think about it, you read relevant material, you get new ideas, you take notes and all of that. And then however long that takes, and then there's out-breath. And that I know out-breath is coming when I start getting up in the middle of the night to write little phrases down and all of that.
You're writing a new book now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm actually finishing a book that will be out next fall, and I just left the computer doing these final rewrites with my editor. And I'm working on another book for the year after next fall. Yeah.
The new one that's coming out, that's the Reflections on the Whole Gods, is it?
No, the new one, Gods is the spread. I'm sorry, is a book that has been written and is sort of waiting in line to be published.
It's unpublished so far.
It's not published. I have 3 unpublished novels, and I have a lot of confidence in my editor, and I think he'll get around to them eventually. But they sort of come up as they come up for publication. So it's called When the Gods Come Home to Roost. That book. I just call it Gods for short. No, the one I'm working on now is actually a book about the death penalty. And like Skulk, I thought it was good to approach it kind of laterally instead of going on a rant against the death penalty. I mean, I belong to a group called Vermonters Against the Death Penalty, and you know, you can choose to crash directly into walls, or you can choose to try somehow to go over them or around them. And my lateral strategy in this book, which is called The Good Doctor, was to look at the first use of the guillotine in the French Revolution. And that's in 1792. That's not Donnie Fell, you know, sitting, waiting to get executed from a Vermont crime. So looking at how the development of certain attitudes towards violence, towards utopia, towards human nature, all of that happened in an extremely glowing way during the French Revolution. Well, I had only really primitive notions about how the French Revolution went, but I spent 6 months researching and reading only books about the French Revolution, and I feel, and then that was all the in-breath. And out of that, I wrote a book about, which has 5 characters, and hopefully they're equal characters. But the good doctor of the title is Dr. Guillotin. And Guillotin actually didn't invent the guillotine, although many people think he did. And he was actually horrified that he became identified with the guillotine.
Well, the guillotine was supposed to be a humane means of punishment.
Exactly.
At that time, the death penalty was much more painful than what the guillotine produced.
Exactly, and that was part of the thrust, the Enlightenment thrust of the French Revolution. And Guillotin proposed a mechanical device. Although he hadn't designed this device, he had seen pictures of other uses of mechanical decapitation. And he proposed simply the use of a mechanical device, which would be instantaneous, painless, and without flaw. Right? And that was, as a humanitarian move out of the normal procedures for capital punishment, which actually depended upon what class you were in. The nobility had the option to be beheaded because it was quick and painless and because they didn't have to be touched by the executioner. The bourgeoisie could be hung. The rabble would be broken on a wheel, which means simply strapped down on a wheel and, you know, crushed by blows. And the heretics could be burned at the stake, and for especially horrible crimes like parricide, the killing of the king or the attempt to kill the king. There were all sorts of things, and I described them in my book, one particular parricide, the treatment of one particular parricide, drawn and quartered, boiling lead. It's pretty terrible. And so Guillotin's proposal to have things be done quickly and painlessly was a big advance, but it was also a proposal that the punishment would not relate to the social status, that everybody who had capital punishment would have the same punishment, and you couldn't get better off because you were a noble.
And as it turned out, the guillotine was especially for the nobility. There were more of those guillotined than anybody else, right?
Yes and no. I can't give you exactly, but when the terror happened, and the terror happened after my book ends, because my book ends at the first use of the guillotine, right? And then assumes that the reader will have at least enough knowledge to know where this went. And there's sort of predictions of where it might go in the course of the book. Then one of the major uses of the guillotine was to stop counter-revolution. And so yes, the nobility obviously were not into the revolution, but many of them were into the revolution. It's amazing how much support there was from the nobility to equalize society. But counter-revolutionaries were everywhere, and Robespierre was paranoid enough to see them everywhere, and then the whole terror happened, and 40,000 people approximately were guillotined until 94, in 2 years.
I think our viewers are beginning to see that most of your books are political.
Yeah, these books, these 4 books, and are political, although this other category that I kind of discovered this morning, as I thought, what books, what have I written, is also in the heart category. Because when I see the treatment of prisoners, capital crime prisoners, what happens to them in the course of waiting for their execution, what happens on as the execution approaches and on execution day, and the treatment during execution and all of that, and you look at the history in modern America, this is also incredible cruelty. And it's the cruelty aspect, I think, that draws me to be against the death penalty. I mean, if you want to keep somebody off the streets because you really do consider they're dangerous, clearly, in modern prisons, life without possibility of parole will do it, no doubt. There's a lot of cruelty involved in that, too.
And we know there's a lot of mistakes, too, in capital cases.
Of course, and racial problems of racial imbalance and all of that. So there are many, many reasons to abolish the death penalty, and one of the curious things is why America retains the death penalty, and that's one of the things I try and treat in this book. What's so special about us when, France and Germany and Japan and, most advanced industrial countries, not Great Britain and Australia, but not the English countries, but all other all the Sweden, Finland, etc. Italy have abolished the death penalty, and they look at us as barbarians. What's going on? Why do we do that? And so this is one of the things the book is looking at. But through the French Revolution.
Now, you studied the French Revolution, and you talk about 40,000 people during the Terror.